So this is the really weird thing, right? At the moment, what Parliament and the MPs and the local councillors and the police really, and all these different non-departmental government bodies like, the Boundary Commission and the Electoral Commission, Ofcom, Ombudsman, you name it, right? They're all doing the complete opposite of what they're supposed to. What they're doing is they are putting law through that they're doing things, right, that they're not allowed to do. There are things that they aren't allowed to do, right? Set in law. Primarily, actually, the Human Rights Act 1998, right? All those convention rights. I mean, I know that you're saying, oh, well, what about all these court cases where these foreigners are winning rights, or, people going to school in Ireland, are challenging religion, or foreigners' rights in England, even if they were here illegally. I don't know what's going on with that, right? These are independent cases. We're talking about the actual government itself, right? The government are breaking every single one of those convention rights, but intentionally on purpose, right? I mean, like Kim Leadbeater MP, Lord Falconer, and then we've got Mark Zuckerberg coming in from America, and, Amazon and all these big American companies who aren't actually started in England. They're all breaking like the privacy rights, also the police. All of those rights have been broken. Yet, when it comes to us and what we are meant to be able to do, they're blocking us. So, like, e-petitions is a huge thing. It's public bills, right? And public bills are going to be what gets legislation made, right? Because it's the public business for public bills and public petitions, as opposed to the private business and private bills for private petitions, right? Because public bills needs a lot of public support, because it's going to be put into the main law of the country. That's why you need a lot of signatures, right? I mean, you got private members' bills, but we're meant to have public petitioning. And it's meant to be how we get things made and done in law, but also grievances against these people for what they're doing wrong. And it's been completely and utterly blocked, totally obstructed. And I don't think that the Commissioner for Standards or the Ombudsman are doing much either about complaints, right? Now, so what's happening is the complete opposite. All of the facilities and resources that we're meant to be able to use to get things done, they're denying us them. They're also lying to do it and blocking us and completely, totally lying. Just the blatantly obvious lies, and even resorting to say, no, I don't know what you're asking, right? Meanwhile, they themselves, when it says that there's things that they aren't allowed to do, particularly with this right to life, it's a biggie, it's a big one, right? They're going and doing it. Like Falconer's putting this legislation through, but that Lord Joff did it. Prior to 1998, there was nothing stopping them from doing it. Apparently, there've been a couple of attempts for, acts of law to try put it through, for culling off the population and things like that, ironically. But it's this Lord Joff. After 1998, no one should have attempted it, right? But 2004 to 2006, that Lord Jeff, it should have got called out then, that Human Rights Act. But, I don't think they had the internet back then as much established with all the laws up, so you could read them all and learn what the law actually is, right? Why he would try it after Tony Blair had enacted that act, 6 years after, should have really still been in the memory, right? And then the subsequent attempts are just completely and totally, you're not allowed to do it. It says here, right, it says that everyone's right to life shall be protected by law. So if they put a law through that that takes a life away, it's not protected anymore. It says it shall be protected by law. So the law has to protect it, except for sentences from criminal convictions. But Tony Blair abolished the last sentence for criminal conviction, which was the death penalty. So no criminal conviction takes a life away. And you're not allowed to do it in civil at all. But this is in law. This is like the European Convention rights are like, they're like the American First Amendment when it's like, Congress shall make no law. That's a law telling the government what it can and can't do, what senators can and can't do, right? So this is the right to life is the most important thing. Now, you would have thought, right, West Yorkshire Police, right, for example, I'm reporting Kim Leadbeater in because she's primarily been working on this, right? Now, you would have thought the police are concerned about people's lives because they're always banging on about, we don't want people committing suicide, or there are vulnerable people around, or, someone's been hurt or fallen. Whenever anyone gets injured, like, even if it's not crime related, they fall off a cliff, or they're stuck on an island, or they're stranded somewhere, or there's someone drowning, or something like that, the police are always like, charging into the rescue, supposedly. We're here to protect the public. We want to save life. Why are we so adamant about speeding offences? Because, we don't want people to be injured, right? So the police, right, are massive on, we're the heroes, we protect life, right? Now, this is the thing. Check this out, right? This is the police oath. Now, I've made this out to John Robbins. He's been recently knighted, just this year, just gone this, we're in February now, into February, March. He was in the knighthood's honours for 2026 just now, right? So he's a brand new knight, right? Now, I've made this out in his name because this is the police oath, okay? Now, this is like MPs used to have an oath when they uphold the rights and liberties of the subject, but they ditched that, right? But check this out in the police oath, right? I'm going to read it out for John Robbins. I, Sir John Robbins, QPM DL of West Yorkshire Police, do solemnly, sincerely declare and affirm that I will and truly serve the King in office of Constable with fairness, integrity, allegiance, and impartiality. That means, you're not supposed to take sides, right? Upholding fundamental human rights. Okay, so the fundamental human rights are the human rights in the Human Rights Act articles, right? And according equal respect to all people, and that I will, to the best of my power, cause the peace to be kept and preserved, and prevent all offences against people and property, and that while I continue to hold the said office, I will, to the best of my skill and knowledge, discharge all the duties, therefore faithfully, according to law, right? So he's got to act according to the law. So really, if there's no law for something, right, he doesn't have to do it, right? So it's not like he's not doing you a favour. It's like, that you can't carry a heavy basket there, There's a woman going shopping, right, and, she's struggling to carry a shopping, here comes John Robbins to the rescue, right? There's no legal requirement for that, right? She's not breaking any law, and he's not upholding any law by helping her carry a basket, right? He's not that's not what he's sworn on oath to do, right? He's got to act according to the legislation and prevent all offences, right? But this is the thing. I don't think the police can get their head around the Human Rights Act 1998 and the articles that there actually are any offences, right? Because where's the crime? Where's the crime? Where's the punishment for it, right? It tells you what can and can't be done, right? Now, it says prevent all offences, but separately, right? Separately, to prevent all offences, it says upholding fundamental human rights, right? How do you do that? How do you uphold fundamental human rights if he can't see an offence, right? If he can't see what the crime is, what act is the crime under, right? how do I uphold fundamental human rights? Well, you stop people from breaking them, right? Surely, right? Now, this is the thing. This is the Human Rights Act 1998, Schedule 1. This is what the human rights are to uphold them, right? How do I uphold the rights? Well, by stopping people from doing things that go against the rights, clearly, right? Now, it says, this is what John Robbins QPM, right? This is what he has sworn an oath to uphold. These are the rights. These are the fundamental human rights. It used to be upholding our rights and liberties of the subjects, right, in constitutional law, right? We'll scrap that. I've got a feeling they're going to scrap this soon, right? Once they've managed to completely and totally violate all these till there's nothing left of them, I think they're going to like chuck it out of the earth, just like they did with the rights and liberties, right? But at the moment, it's still in there, right? How does Sir John Robbins QPM protect and uphold the convention rights? Well, by stopping people from violating them, clearly, right? That is an additional and separate obligation on top of upholding law and preventing offences, right? Now, it says here, everyone's right to life shall be protected by law. The law must protect it. That's the law. The law must protect it. The law has to protect it. If the law isn't protecting it, right, then the right to life isn't being upheld and it's not being protected and there's a violation. So how can you uphold these convention rights? By preventing people from violating them, right? Now, Kim Ledbetter is in the process of violating them. She's in the process of trying to get legislation through, right, which does something that it says you can't do here in law. The law can't even do it, it says. Even the law can't do it, right? No one shall be deprived of his life intentionally, save in the execution of a sentence of a court following conviction of a crime, right, for which is the penalty. So the only law that you're allowed to have in force, right, is for the sentence of a crime, not anything to do with civil matters at all, right? Now, Tony Blair repealed the last offence. No, he didn't. I didn't mean to say that he repealed the last offence. I meant to say that he repealed the sentence, the last sentence of the offence, which had the death penalty, right, which was treason. But all this is treasonous. Going against the law is treasonous, right? It's treason. So there aren't any death penalties left because they got rid of the death penalty for murder and then they got rid of the death penalty for treason. That was the last one. So there aren't actually any laws which can take your life if you commit a crime. But what Ledbetter is trying to do, and Falconer and these MPs in Jersey, Jersey State members, deputies, whatever they're called, or constables, right, is put law through which violates and goes against this. Now, that's what that Lord Joff was trying to do, right? But you can't do it. This is like the government can't have a law which does that. This is what this law says. The only way they can do that is if they change this law, the Human Rights Act. If this article here was repealed, then they could make the Assisted Dying Act because it's trying to take a life through civil law. This says that you can't have a law that takes a life unless it's a sentence of a crime, right? These are the human right. In fact, this is the whopper. This is the human right of all human rights, right? And, you know, Robbins now, he's a knight of the empire, right? Now, is Robbins going to refuse to act and uphold this and say, I'm not going to act, right? That's misconduct in public office, and that's perjury of oath, right? Because if he does not act faithfully according to law, if he does not do the best in his power to prevent offences, if he does not do the best in his power upholding the fundamental human rights, then he's in perjury of his oath, right, as a police constable, right? Chief Constable, and he's just been knighted, but that don't mean out to me, because in the contempt of Parliament, in the back of the costs and fees for private bills, I can have him committed to Parliament for breach of privilege or contempt, right? It doesn't matter whether he's a knight of the Empire or not. It's a little bit more expensive for a knight. You have to pay it's not just like £5. It was about £8 or something, right? An extra £3, whatever. But, Knights of the Empire can be put into custody, right? So none of this Jimmy Savile business, whatever. Robbins needs to act. If Robbins does not act, whether he's a dame, a knight, a baron, I don't care, right? He's in misconduct in public office, so he needs to, stop sitting down and polishing his new suit of armour that he's got and get into action, right? Because Leadbeater is breaking the law of the Human Rights Act, and Robbins has got a sworn duty to uphold the Human Rights Act 1998, right? Whether he has to, I don't care whether he has to arrest every MP, I don't know, right? We'll have to have a general election, right? That's fact, and no games or innuendos or messing around and not doing it. They always think of something else to do instead, right? Some excuse. They've arrested. They prosecute, Mike Amesbury MP, no problem. They prosecute Dan Norris MP, no problem. They prosecute Patrick Spence MP, no problem. They've just arrested Mandelson, right? And then you've got, they've even arrested, Prince Andrew, right? Well, he's not called Prince Andrew anymore. Andrew Mountbatten, right? So the evidence against Leadbeater is in her casework, in her office. All the work she's been doing in her local constituency office, surgery, with people going in to see her about assisted dying, working towards getting it put into legislation, right? It is a violation of this fundamental human right. And they've even she's voted on it. So that vote on it is against her oath of acting according to law. Kim Leadbeater swore an oath, right, into Parliament according to law, right? And she's not acting according to law of the Human Rights Act 1998, Article 2. She's acting contrary to that. MPs are not allowed to make or enact legislation that takes a life away in civil proceedings while this is in force, right? Only they can reintroduce the death penalty for treason. They can reintroduce the death penalty for murder, right? They're trying to do it for civil matters. And you can't have it. You're not allowed to do it. This says you can't do it. It's the equivalent of, Congress shall make no law. They're not allowed to make certain laws and certain things, right? So we need action from Robbins. And, if he's just been given a knighthood, if Parliament gave him the knighthood, can he act with impartiality? Is it possible for Robbins to act impartially according to law if it might poo-poo his knighthood or, spoil the people who gave him the knighthood, right? This is the thing, right? How does he get these honours and accolades, right? This is the thing. So, Robbins needs to act because it's a no-brainer. A lot of these offences and crimes are simple no-brainers. Like, you don't need to go racing around in a police car. You don't need to send a advanced forensic squad around looking for fingerprints in a building, with a scalpel and scraple, and you don't need sniffer dogs. You don't need a team of special volunteers combing a field for 24 hours, right? You don't need a helicopter. You don't need anything like that. All you need is to go to Kim Leadbeater's office, take all her documents and things like that, right? And her parliamentary office, and on the evidence that she's been, she voted on and has been working on legislation to take people's lives away through civil proceedings. And that is a body of casework, right? Now you might say, well, is it privileged? Well, this is the thing, right? In the 1688, this is when we get the 1688 Bill of Rights out as well, right? It says that illegal prosecutions by the courts, King's Bench, Westminster, etc., right? The King's Justices, for matters cognisable, decidable only in Parliament, right? Look, Parliament, while this Act is in force, while this Article 2 is in effect, Parliament cannot make that law, right? Illegal prosecutions by the King's Bench for matters cognisable, decidable only in Parliament. At the moment, it's not decidable in Parliament whether they can have the assisted suicide bill, because this says they can't do it, right? So it's not something that is cognisable and decidable in Parliament currently. They can't do it, right? Repealing the Human Rights Act 1998 and Article 2 is something they can do in Parliament that is not unlawful, right? Although I don't know whether repealing that, repealing it is then putting life at threat. I don't know whether they've tied themselves in a knot with it, right? But for sure, you would have it's not cognisable currently in Parliament to vote on and enact law which takes a life away through civil proceedings, right? It's illegal for them to do it. And you say, well, MPs are the ones who make and change the law. Yeah, they made a law that says they're not allowed to make certain laws, right? And they've sworn an oath to uphold that according to law, right? This is the thing. Now, this is what Robbins has sworn to act according to law. If you want to be a police officer, right, you can't just pick and choose, we want to do this. We've got a SWAT team. We want to, do a drugs bust. We want to, whatever. The public report the crimes, right? This is a very serious, important crime currently, because those human rights violations are very high level. This is like misconduct in public office level. If Robbins doesn't act, he's going to be misconduct of public office, right? He has to act, because the oath actually is now upholding fundamental human rights, okay? Upholding fundamental human rights is part of his oath. And what are the fundamental human rights? Well, the fundamental human rights are the ones in the Human Rights Act 1998. That's what they are, right? He's got to uphold them. So he's got to prevent Leadbeater and the other MPs and the Lords from putting that act into force, right? And you say, well, they're privileged. Well, no, they're not, because Parliament isn't allowed to decide that at the moment, right? The Parliament cannot do it, so it's not something that's cognisable only in Parliament, because it's not cognisable by Parliament unless they repeal the Human Rights Act, then it's cognisable. So, the MPs are acting in perjury, and actually the police can act. The police could also have applied for impeachment, right? This is the ironic thing about the police when it comes to MPs. MPs in the Crown Prosecution Service can move to have MPs impeached in Parliament anyway, right? Not just prosecute them like Lord Hanningfield in, Suffolk Crown Court, which is a load of rubbish. Hanningfield should not have been prosecuted criminally. The newspapers shouldn't have done all the stories and badgered the CPS to take him to prosecution in Suffolk Crown Court. Lord Hanningfield had supposedly messed around with fraud money, right, for his House of Lords, claims, right? You can't use protections against the King's debt, right, owing money to the King. That's like in the Claim of Right Act anyway, right? And similar to the Bankruptcy Act, which is why it's in the Bankruptcy Act, right, because of the Claim of Right Act. So he can't evade a civil debt, right? So if there's a case for him owing money, right, to the government or the King, right, and you need evidence, you can prosecute him. Well, it's not prosecution. What they should meant to have done was brought a civil action against him in High Court and investigated him to prove that he owed the money, right? And then pay it back. That's civil action, right? Which you can't use protection for. And then once they prove that he did do it, right, then you say, oh, well, if he swindled it and then he's had to pay the money back, right, he clearly obviously committed the offence, right? You know, he did it intentionally. So now we can go to the House of Lords and say, can you punish Lord Hanningfield? You know, because like, you know, obviously we proved that he, you know, did the deed, right? So, but you can have him impeached. You know, the Lords can judge the other Lords. So, you know, I don't know what they do to him, you know, because, you know, supposedly, that's all under impeachment anyway. You know, apparently they can't be suspended from Parliament, but they can be imprisoned by the other Lords. But do it properly, you know, do it properly. There's a proper way to do things, and that's off what Crown Court charade with, you know, Jeremy Johnson's ridiculous 6-page paper of balls, you know, and then he got promoted to be a High Court judge. I really don't know what these people are on. I don't know whether they're on Dutch courage, pure Dutch courage, whether they're on like some sort of like, kind of like heroin or something that, you know, gives them false confidence and blots out a lot of information. So like, you know, it's like almost like, you know, dancing on the edge of a cliff and having no fear, but there's real danger there, but they don't realise, you know, or they're just using their title to protect them from the danger. It's like Sam Goose, you know, climbing the ladder, climb the ladder, climb the ladder, you know. These people climb higher. They go for the authority and protections, but they're the ones breaking the law. So Ledby is severely breaking the law now, right, with some other MPs, right? And if West Yorkshire Police don't do anything about it, they're in contempt. And I'm sure West Yorkshire Police officers, you know, save lives on a daily basis. But so what? This is particularly, right. There's no special provision in this oath for, stopping burglars. Generally, they have to prevent all offences, right? They generally have to prevent all offences, but this is a thing, right? Whenever you ever seen a police officer prevent an offence, right? They always call them after someone's committed an offence, right? Because you want the revenge and you want them prosecuted, right? They rarely prevent offences. In fact, they only punish people for committing offences. So they poorly prevent offences, and crime's on the increase. We've got loads of immigrants coming in committing more offences. Preventing offences, they could have prevented offences by forming a barrier around the coastline and stopping all these illegal immigrants from coming in, right? Specifically, upholding fundamental human rights. Well, what is the most fundamental of all the human rights? Which is, tell me, like, can you get John Robbins? Can someone get him in a chair and sit down, right, and say, John, mastermind, what is the most fundamental of all the human rights? Tell me, in the Human Rights Act, which is the most fundamental of them all, right? Could it possibly be the right to life, right? Seeing though you're always going on about, oh, we saved lives, you know, we saved a dog from drowning in a pool, we saved someone from a climbing accident, you know, oh, that's what the police are, you know, the only thing that the police have got going for them at the moment, right, is that, oh, we're protecting and saving lives, right, you know, because we're the good guys, right? How can you protect and save more lives, right, than stopping someone from putting a law through that they're going to start taking people's lives away from them? When it says that, you can't even do that. You can't have that. You can't have it in law. You're not allowed to have it. You know, it's like they reintroduced, like they got rid of all the death penalties, every single one of them, you know, even for murder and treason. And now they're reintroducing death through civil law when it says you can't have it for civil law. You can only have it for crime. So I don't know what part of this West Yorkshire Police do not get. I don't know what part of it they don't understand. But when you contact their, like the contact centre, and you report a crime, and then you get some officer calling you back, and you're like, oh no, just don't tell me, right? No, let me guess. Well, it's like Mystic Meg or something. You're going to tell them, let me, put someone in the lottery now. I'm going to tell you numbers are going to come out, right? You know, I've got a premonition. You're going to say, we're not going to do anything about it. I'm sorry, we're not going to act. We don't think there's a crime here. Bollocks! You know, this is the sinister. I want to withdraw my tax money from funding the police, right? If they're not gonna act on my crime reports, there's no point having them, right? I don't care how many, dogs they've got out of a pond, right? If they do not act on my crime reports, I aren't funding them. They're taking money from me against my will, and they're doing with it whatever they want, but not what I want, right? And not what the law says. Not what the law says. According to law, right? According to law, not just prevent all offences, right? Upholding fundamental human rights. So they've got to uphold fundamental human rights. So we don't know how to do that. We don't know how to do it. Right, well, why have you got the uniform on? Because someone else could have that uniform who does know how to uphold fundamental human rights. Someone could be wearing that uniform who knows what the Human Rights Act articles are and understands them when they read the words. Someone who even knows what their own oath is for. What is the point in it, right? Everyone's right to life shall be protected by law. Not everyone's right to life shan't be protected by law. No, everyone's right to life shall be protected by the law, right? How can we do that? Well, by preventing the law from not protecting it anymore, right? And how is the law not going to protect it anymore? When Kim Leadbeater fucking gets a, dandy signature on this is a dime bill, right? So you need to intervene to prevent human rights, Article 2, from being violated, right? We need police action. And if these police officers don't know how to do that, they need to learn fast, right? Because I know how to do it. This is how you do it. You get in a police car, quite simply, you drive to Kim Leadbeater's constituency office, right? You say, Kim Leadbeater, I'm arresting you on suspicion of violation of Article 2 of the Human Rights Act 1998, right? You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, right? This is the thing. And then you get all the evidence and then you put it on a table and you say, can we prove that Kim Leadbeater has been acting towards a violation of Article 2 of the Human Rights Act? Yes, because she'll be trying to get bills put through Parliament for it. Right, it's a violation of this, right? Well, where's the crime, though? Where's the crime? We don't see the crime. Okay, how can we could, how can we try and stop her from doing this? Right, firstly, has she acted according to law, right? This is the law, right? This is law. There's not an offence here. Oh, where's the offence? Look, right, this is the law. Did someone act according to it or not? Right? No. And what does their oath say? To act according to law. So they haven't acted according to law, have they? They did not act according to the law. So what's that? They broke their oath. What's that? It's called perjury. Perjury. They broke their oath. It's a crime, right? Perjury is a crime. They broke their oath. They didn't act according to the law of the Human Rights Act, 1998. That's perjury, right? And also it's misconduct in public office. Clearly, if you break your oath, that is misconduct in public office, right? Because you're not conducting yourself according to what you have sworn in the oath. That is misconduct in public office, right? And then you've also got, is it treason against the country? If you're sworn in as an MP in Parliament and you sworn an oath to act according to law and you don't, are you acting against your country and nation if you're trying to get a law put through that kills people when it says that you can't do that? Is that treason against the nation, right? And would that crime of treason of affording the death penalty? But Tony Blair removed the death penalty. So does that mean that Kim Leadbeater could have actually faced the death penalty if it wasn't for Tony Blair repealing it, right? So she, is there some irony in this assisted suicide bill that is about killing people, right? And the fact that there aren't any death penalties left anyway for criminal law, well, that's the only thing that you're meant to be allowed to have in law, right? If the police don't understand this and don't get it, right, I'm concerned. I understand it, very clear, and I'll know exactly what evidence to get and where it is and how to do it, how to describe it, and how to go into the court and prove it, because the evidence is there that it has been done, right? And here's a law that's been broken and violated. Now, the only obstruction to this is the police saying, we're not going to do it. We don't want to do it. But this says that you've got to do it. You don't have a choice. You're acting impartially. You have to uphold the fundamental human rights and prevent all offences like perjury of oath, right? Perjury of oath and treason. Prevent all offences. So this is the thing. Now, we're getting into police. If police don't act, they're in misconduct as well. They're in perjury of their oath as well, right? And they possibly, if they're acting as an organised force with other forces and they all refuse to do it, we're looking at treason. I think we're being taken over by a military regime. And all this, why are they swearing these oaths? Why are they swearing these oaths as if it means something and getting knighthoods and awards and things like that when they're not doing what it says on the tin? They're not doing what it says in the oath. Or they're thick. They don't understand, or they don't understand the law. If you can't understand this, this is law, right? So I'm scratching my head now. The police are getting sinister, and they're living a complete, absolute contradiction. Are they? Can we take them seriously? What is all this award ceremonies? Do they think that, because we saved some puppies and, a few people from accidents and so forth, right? We're legendary heroes and that's it. And we're not going to do anything else. But, there's no more fundamental human right than that, right? Yet here it says upholding fundamental human rights. Obviously, except when they're kicking your door in, and twisting your nipple, because you're resisting arrest, right? Obviously, except for that, right? This is a thing we need. If Robbins doesn't act right, I've got a contempt of Parliament form, right, which says that Knights of the Realm can be put in custody. So it means I'm not bothered whether he's just been given a silver shining new suit of armor or not, right? Because it doesn't matter. All it means is that he's even got even more obligation. Supposedly he's the more honest, respectable, trustworthy officer out of them all, right, who's going to uphold the fundamental rights to a higher degree and better capacity with more skill and knowledge. In fact, if he is the chief constable and if he's the one with a knighthood, then surely no officer in the whole force has more skill and knowledge than him, right? No one in the whole police force has better skill and knowledge than him at all. So if he doesn't know what upholding fundamental human rights is, and what is the main human right that there is in the whole Human Rights Act of Convention,